Primes versus zooms, which should you choose? Welcome back to Photography After Hours. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, today we're going to be talking about lenses, specifically primes versus zooms. So we're going to be going over some of the benefits. Before we start that, I'd like to introduce everyone. We have Sprague, Susie, Scott, and my name is Nick. We're from Photographers Adventure Club, which is PAC. We do photo walks, meetings, networking seminars, workshops, and photo trips. You'll be seeing more of those pop up as we have the time to plan them. So today we're going to be going over these benefits of primes versus zooms. So we want to hear from you at the end too. So don't just watch the video and then log off. Put your comments in the bottom. So we're going to start with Sprague, as I always do.
That's
Welcome
right.
back, Sprague.
Thank you very much. It's just so much fun to be here.
So we were talking about this before, and we wanted to hear a little bit about what we were chatting about. And what do you think as far as we were talking about portability of these kind of big zoom lenses like the 70-200 and stuff like that versus like a prime lens? What do you think the portability is for you? What do you like?
Well, for me, because I do a lot of street photography and travel photography, the fewer the lenses, the better, and the lighter those lenses are, the better they are. So I'm willing to use a zoom lens versus a prime, so I have fewer lenses, and that way I don't have to change them out as often. And even if I can go from like a 2.8 to an f4, for example, then it's going to be a lighter lens and easier to carry. And for daylight, most of my pictures, I'm not really looking for as much of a shallow depth of field. So
Gotcha.
the 2.8 isn't really quite the thing for me, because
Not something you're going to use
well, yeah, I mean, and you know, I carried a 2.8 in Europe, and you know, it was just like, oh, it's just like
the big
bam.
70-200.
The other thing that's fun about a 2.8 is you take it out and you point it towards your victim, and it's like pointing a high-powered rifle at them. They go, hit the deck! He's got a 70-200!
Yeah, we heard about you getting beat down in one of the other episodes with taking pictures in Amsterdam and stuff. So.
Yeah, don't do that. Be careful what buildings you point those at, you know, because, you know, the ladies were offended.
You could incite a mob.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah.
So, you know, Scott, you were talking to us about the benefits for you of some of the f-stop stuff that he may not need as far as the speed of the lenses. So why don't you go into that a little bit and tell me or tell our audience what you feel some of these primes may help you with.
Yeah, that's really the reason why I use the primes, is just for that wide open aperture, the just fast lens. You know, I shoot a lot in the dark, pretty much, and you know, if I can gain 2 stops of extra light,
Sure.
then that means everything to me.
Especially you do event photography as well,
right.
So you might need that there.
Exactly.
Fast moving, and where if you're doing street photography during the day, it's
and
not...
I also love the fact that I can just blow out any background that I want. You know, sometimes you're shooting in areas that are less desirable, but you got to make a great photo. So there's nothing better to just blow the background out completely and problem solved, you know. So,
Sure.
But, you know, I still use zooms, but I use them out of necessity. It's ironic, the lens that I use the most is the lens that I actually like the least. And it's just, zooms are a necessity. You have to have them.
Which is the one that lives on my camera, is the 24-70.
Yeah,
right?
it's a 24-70. It's your workhorse. It's the lens that everybody should have in their camera bag, but it's also the one lens that I hate. Like, I don't want to say hate. I have a very strong disliking for it.
You have a love-hate relationship with it.
It's one of the, I mean, you need it. I use it, like I go through all my metadata in my photos, and that's probably the lens that I use.
90% of what
Yeah, I mean, it's a high percentage of, that lens is always on my camera. And it's just out of necessity, but I just don't like that lens.
So, Susie, what do you use? Because I had a talk with them before we started the studio here, but I didn't have a chance to chat with you. So, do you have any likes or dislikes for one or the other?
It depends on what I'm shooting. So, if I'm out and about and I'm doing outdoor type stuff, I like the flexibility of a zoom lens, particularly the 70-200. I like a lot, and shooting that on a crop sensor, it gets me a lot closer, so to speak. And I just love the benefits of being able to zoom in on something and not, you know, especially if I'm trying to photograph an animal or something and I'm not having to get so close that I spook it away.
The snake when we're with Michael and stuff
Right.
like that. Like, so, right there.
I'm not really worried about spooking it as much as just, you know, sometimes they just reel and turn on you. And
yeah. No, he was like from here to the. It was
just
fun.
striking distance.
Body length away, you know.
Just this much in striking distance. He was all right.
But as far as primes go, I have a favorite one just for what I like to do in club photography and stuff. And we can get into why another time, but for me, the 50 millimeter prime, and I shoot the 1.8, is really very, very handy.
And so why is that your favorite lens?
That's actually one of my favorite lenses.
It's really, well, they call it the Nifty 50 if you haven't ever heard of it. It is
$50.
It's yeah, sometimes you can pick it up for $50. Brand new, it can run probably 200. Used easily 100. You can pick them up everywhere. People, you know, pretty much you need to have one in your bag. It is an excellent starting lens to kind of get used to shooting shallow depth of field. It's, I think, a safe bet for, you know, testing the waters in terms of using a prime and letting go of the option, which can sometimes be a crutch, right? Zooming in and out and not having to figure out what's going to be in your frame depending on where your feet are. And there are some certain benefits of the 50 millimeter. I won't go into it now, but I get a lot of good shots that I would otherwise miss with anything that was 2.0 or above. And any of the zoom lenses, at least that I can afford, are well over that. You know, they're 2.8 or higher, and that's just too slow for a dark, smoky nightclub environment or a concert or anything like that.
Excellent.
Now, I'd just like to point out, I've known these people for about 4 years now, and I've never actually seen them use a prime lens. But, you know,
I do have a prime. I have a 100 macro, and it's really nice for portraits, which Mark Killian was helping me with that. I was like, what are you shooting?
The 100 is one of my go-to lenses.
Yeah, I didn't realize that because I was like, macro. So you just think, I bought this, it's a macro. But when I saw him, Mark was using it at one of our model shoots, and I'm like, what is that? I'm like, what lens is that? And he's like, oh, it's the 100 macro. It's excellent. Everything is blown out behind the model. And I was like, never thought about that. I might actually use the lens more now because there's not many bugs out here and stuff. There's not little things like there was back in New Jersey.
That lens is that lens stays on. That's like, I call that my morning lens. That's like, because, you know, when I go to work, you know, you start photographing, it's all details. So everything I shoot all my details and all my portraits in the morning when I get started on a job. And so that's like my morning lens. I throw that on.
And the lazy lens comes
Yeah,
later.
and then the lazy lens comes on later.
The zoom.
When Scott's sitting there with his legs crossed, just catching things as they go by.
Well, the thing I like best about mine is that I can just look for the patina of dust on it, and then I know that my house needs to be cleaned.
of your primes.
Yes, that's right.
Well, on dust, that was one of the points I wanted to make. Was if you're changing lenses constantly, do you ever have a problem, one of you guys, with dust getting in there? Because now you have your lens off constantly, where if you have a zoom, you have all those focal lengths taken care of. So unless you're going to put on something for birding or further away, you don't have to pop it off. So is that a constant problem of having to get your sensor cleaned?
I don't even think about it, honestly.
It happens a lot. When I was in the Middle East and Egypt, you know, you've got nothing but sand and it's blowing all the time. And so, yeah, you have to be conscious of that every time you take a lens on and off, that, you know, it just fills with dust. And, yeah, I found after a day of shooting, I looked in there and it just looked like somebody dropped it in the sand because it's all over. So. But if you just give it a good bang on the table, it all comes off.
That fixes so many things.
It does, yeah.
it's right in there with the
what's wrong with
duct
this
tape and Windex solutions category.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can clean it with Windex. You know, remember that. That's a good tip.
No, I think you were talking about putting your elbow Windex from Big Fat Greek
Right.
Wedding.
They say there isn't anything. What was it? The only tools that you need in a toolkit is WD-40 and duct tape. Right?
Yeah.
So size and weight were one of the things that I want to chat about. The primes are a lot smaller a lot of times. I know, especially when you go into the a lot of the micro four thirds stuff, they're tiny. Like Alex's lenses are like this big, whereas the zooms start to get as big as some DSLR ones. Is that a consideration that you can fit a lot more lenses in there instead of a big 70-200 or something like that?
Yeah, I mean the size. I mean, don't get me. I love the 7200. That's like if I had to choose the zoom, that is my go-to zoom. It's just one of the best.
But different time periods. So that's just night lens.
Well, the thing is that every
watch.
lens has its own purpose, And I mean, I literally have about 5 lenses in my bag, and I use them all. Those are like I only have in my bag what I use, and I use them all. I have 2 zooms. Which are my necessity zooms, the 24-70, 7200. But the 7200 is a fantastic zoom. I love that lens. It's a fantastic lens. But I find myself shooting, some of the primes, and some of the primes I have are big chunks of glass too. I mean, that 85 1.2, that is a heavy beast. I mean, that thing's it's a brick. Mm-hmm. And so, as far as weight concerned, I never really, I never concern myself with the weight. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to shave some pounds and shave some weight off the camera gear, but honestly, I've just gotten so used to it that
What about quality?
Quality-wise,
they're supposed to be a lot sharper.
Yeah, I do find that the primes are really sharp.
So you have no variable.
Yeah, there's no variable zoom. There's less elements.
It's
going
optimized
through.
for that focal length, whereas
the
zoom is always a compromise between the extremes of the range, and it's usually best, obviously, somewhere in the middle.
In the middle,
and same thing with aperture too. So there's kind of a sweet spot
right.
lens where it's the best, and then everything else kind of falls off.
But I'll tell you that 7200 is just right up there with any prime. The quality of that lens is, it's not just sharp. It's crazy tack sharp. I mean, it's almost too sharp. Like sometimes you have to go in post-production and soften the image because it's too sharp.
I've never had that problem.
So is for lazy people, are zooms better? So someone that just wants to just sit there, like you were saying, and zoom in and out, or I don't want to walk across those cactus to get the shot, just zoom in and handle it, or who would you recommend these lenses to?
As far as laziness goes, the reason I'll tell you the reason why, one of the reasons why I don't like the 24-70, and it's all about being lazy, because you can put that lens on, and especially when you're shooting groups. Now granted, it is a necessity of lens, but it's so much easier when you've been in these events where you're in a crowded room, it's packed, space is limited, you don't really want to back up too far because you might bump into someone, there's another group, and so it's just easier just to zoom 24 or 35, whatever you need, and it's easy. You're being lazy because you don't want to take the step back.
Sometimes there's no place to take a step back,
and sometimes like I said, it's a necessity. You just got to have it. But
we have unlimited space like we do here. You can just keep going back further and further.
Our vast studio that we have here.
Just keep going. Hello.
The Palatial Pack Studios in
but
the
both
upper
both
west
of them have their
side of
caveats.
Mesa, Arizona.
Both have their pros and cons. I'm not really sure it's any less or greater effort of using either one. I think some people get lazy with the primes and they just stay in one place and they just I can crop it.
Crop that out later.
Yeah, crop that later. Yeah. So I don't know.
Well, I think that primes are best suited for certain shooting conditions, and certainly things like in studio portraiture, stuff like that, where you're not having to work with a variable distance from your subject to the greatest degree. Primes are really the workhorse for a lot of them. 85 you mentioned is a favorite for a lot of portrait photographers. And I mentioned the 50 millimeter. I'll add a little bit more as to why I like the 51.8. You mentioned size and how much glass is in your 85 millimeter, right? The bigger, the 1.2 and the 1.4 have more glass and they don't focus as quickly. And when you're in a dark environment, you need that really quick response. So that's why I would recommend a 1.8 for certain conditions. And it's really effectively just as sharp. I mean, you're not losing as much.
Nobody should ever knock the Plastic Fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, that thing is,
seriously, right?
that is one of the best lenses. I still carry that. Well, I carry the 51.4, but it's just basically the same.
Pretty close.
It's the small, cheap plastic lens, and they're phenomenal. They're
so
awesome.
there you have it. You don't have to buy thousands of dollars worth of lenses, spend $100 to $200.
Yeah.
So we
Drop
want
it, you cry just a little.
We want you guys to make the decision out there. Primes versus zooms. Tell us. I know this is going to be a hot topic, so go crazy and yell at us. Tell us we're wrong. Tell us we're right. We don't care. We want you guys to think out there. That's why we do these.
Right.
So once again, don't forget to check out PAC. It's photoadvclub.com, and we'll see you guys next time. So cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.